Hi, my name is Tori Pritchett, and I am Ruling Archives intern. Today I have the pleasure of interviewing Kenyatta, and I'm going to give her the opportunity to introduce herself.
Yes. Hi, I'm Kenyatta Reed. I serve as the Program and Tutorial Coordinator for Student Support Services here at Johnson C. Smith University.
All right, and Kenyatta, if you could give us a brief description. I know we did a activity in the beginning, the hand map. If you could describe yourself for us.
So based off of this activity, I put some verbs or actions that describe me is to be very resilient, kind, hardworking. I also put like helper and very observant. Some characteristics about me.
Okay, and did you want to share any of the journeys with us?
Yeah, absolutely. So the 3 journeys that I decided to kind of think about and reflect on was like my undergrad experience in college, also moving and transitioning from Ohio to North Carolina when I moved here, and then a current journey that I'm on, more so like religious and just leaning more into my faith. So.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for that. We may piggyback off of that hand map during this interview. So
Okay.
And thank you so much for sharing that. And where is home for you right now?
So I actually am located in Charlotte, North Carolina, in like the university area.
Okay. And were you born in Ohio?
I was born in Ohio, yes. I was born in Canton, Ohio, which is Northeast Ohio. But I moved to Columbus, Ohio, which is Central Ohio, probably around the age of like 8 or 9. And so I was kind of back and forth between the two.
Okay. And during the start of the pandemic, where were you?
So I was actually in school in Northeast Ohio. And I was in Hiram, which is like a small town near like the Akron, Cleveland area, kind of working and doing the assistantship in that program for my master's program.
Okay. And how was it for you during that time? Were you able to stay in school, or how did that go?
It was a very interesting time. I think like it was interesting for everybody. But I was able to actually like secure housing because I lived on the college campus.
Okay.
But my program, my master's program, our school shut completely down. And so it's kind of interesting because when we got the news about the pandemic and everything shutting down, I was actually off of school for spring break, but I was still working for my actual job at the university. And so it's kind of like confusing because my job didn't shut down yet, but my school did. And so it was a lot of like change back and forth between like, what are we doing? Are we staying home? Are we not? But I was able to secure housing because I lived on the campus.
And okay, so with you still working, you were working with them throughout the pandemic?
Yes.
And still continuing school virtually?
Yeah, so we did work virtually. For my job, we also worked virtually for that first, I want to say like the first few months, but when we returned back in the fall, my job did decide to return in person, but school for me didn't. So it was kind of like a conflicting feeling on like, I'm not going to school in person. It's just virtual, but I'm still working in person and I'm still working in the same kind of industry. So higher ed. So yeah.
And how was that for you transitioning to virtual learning?
It was challenging for me just because although I will consider myself an introvert, I'm very much so like hands-on. I like to be kind of learn in person. I don't necessarily do well with kind of like not the face-to-face interaction or just kind of doing things online. I can do it just because I have like that discipline when it comes to academics, but I just thrive better in like learning environments where I can talk to my peers or they're easily accessible. So it was a challenge for me, but I was able to also kind of find a routine in juggling, like the course load that I had. So
Okay. And speaking of routines, what normal routines changed for you during that time on top of school and your work life?
I would say normal routines, just like being able to go to the grocery store, or go work out. I would say that I gain more discipline working out, like at home and things like that. But just understanding, like, sometimes the commute helps with decompression, or just being able to, like, get out of the house was a good routine for me, just because I felt like I spent a lot of time in the house prior to COVID, in school and working and things like that. So not really having extracurriculars to do. So I feel like it kind of changed my routine in the fact of, like, I didn't realize how much I valued my commute time or hanging out with friends and things like that until I couldn't do it at all. So I think it changed a lot.
Yes, and just having to deal with those restrictions, how did that kind of make you feel in terms of like social distancing, curfews that might have been put in place and things like that? How did that make you feel?
So logistically, like, it made sense, so I understood it. Like, I understood why we needed to social distance, why there was a curfew, why some people were only letting a certain amount of people in the stores at a time. But internally, it felt really like, what is happening? Like, lonely in a sense, because I lived maybe 45 to 60 minutes away from, like, people who I actually, like, knew could, go and be outside of their house and kind of still have conversation. So it was a very isolating experience. I think I would describe it best to be that. And it actually became so isolated that I ended up moving in the middle of the pandemic. I moved to Columbus back home with family just to be, like, around someone, because I was just by myself. So, yeah, the restrictions it did take a toll on me personally. But I was able to kind of, like, pivot and go back around family where at least I was in the same house with other people.
Yes.
So.
Gosh, I'm sorry to hear that. And look, you made the best out of it. Now, with you keeping in contact with your family and relationships and things like that, how did you kind of channel it? Of course, I know you said you moved back with them, but what about other friends that you weren't able to see and family? How were you able to keep communication flowing with them?
Mostly through FaceTime. I think that is the joy of, like, again, we, like, take advantage of things that we typically use on a day-to-day basis until we absolutely could only depend on that. So that, I know Zoom became very popular during the pandemic. So we would do, like, Zoom parties or, like, Zoom check-ins, a lot of, like, lives on Instagram and things like that. So I think technology really, like, shifted a bunch. TikTok was a big thing. We would do, like, challenges on TikTok just to...
Okay, you became a TikToker.
I didn't become a TikToker, but we did challenges, yes. Yeah, for sure.
Okay, that's amazing. And were there any new hobbies that you might have picked up?
Yeah, so I think I said this a little bit earlier. I felt like I was able to, like, be a little more disciplined on, like, working out and like just wellness overall. So I had, like, start practicing, like, meditation and yoga, just kind of like ways to decompress. Found, like, a virtual extreme hip hop step class that I like to do, and it's actually become a hobby that I, like, have been able to maintain now. Reading a lot more. I'm not typically a reader when I'm, like, in school, because you read a lot while you're in school, but just, like, for fun and things that I'm actually interested in. That was something that I, like, picked up from the pandemic. And I think too, just valuing time. Like, even though I feel like time was taken from us, it gave us a lot of time to do nothing. And I think that is, like, if I had to look at, like, good things out of the pandemic, it's like it gave you time to reconnect with family or reconnect with friends or just kind of be without having to do anything. Like, you couldn't do anything. So, yeah.
Yes. And with the hobbies that you picked up, I want to kind of shift a little bit. See, so what was some of the challenges that you faced?
While picking up the hobbies?
Just in general.
Or in general.
Mm-hmm.
Well, just being lonely for one. Like I said, I was there like by myself.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think like, you know, when you're lonely and bored and nothing to do, like just eating habits change and things like that for me. So that's kind of like what kickstarted me being a little more disciplined. I'm like, oh no, I can't be in here like just eating snacks. Like, you know what I mean? But I think, yeah, the biggest challenge was like just being away from my family and friends and not having anyone accessible until I was able to kind of adjust and shift. And I guess like the physical isolation was a struggle for me.
Mm-hmm.
Because like I said earlier, like I thrive off of being around people, even if I'm not like in the forefront of things. I can sit in a room and thrive off of just like working independently, but having people present. And so not having that was a struggle for me. I think being in school at the time was also a challenge because it changed the direction in which my program kind of was going.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't necessarily get the full in-person internships experiences and things like that. And so at a later time, when it was time to start preparing for interviews for full-time jobs, I felt a little inadequate because I didn't have that like hands-on in the office experience. Although I did learn things like through a virtual experience, it just wasn't like the same. Yeah.
Okay, and just what I do want to touch on that experience. How did they transition to virtual, like the internships and just school in general? First, starting off with the internships, how was that for you? You know, transitioning virtually.
Yeah. So I had 2 internships at the time. One in the summer for Upward Bound, which was only like a 6 to 7 week program, and then in that fall I had one in academic advising, which is one of the certificates that I earned in my master's program. So my first one, it was very interesting because the program Upward Bound, if you're not familiar with it, it is designed to have an in-person experience. And so it was a bit challenging because I was working with students who were high school seniors, and I was helping prepare them for like entering college into the fall. Well, it was difficult because they're coming out of their senior year of high school. They're in a pandemic. They're stressed out because they don't necessarily know, like, imagine the transition between high school and college and you're like in the middle of a pandemic. And so I couldn't physically be present for them, but I could only provide like this virtual support.
Yeah.
And I think that could have, I think that we work with the cards that we're dealt, but I think that if there was a better, there could have been a better impact if it was an in-person experience. As far as programming wise, we did a lot of like using technology again. So like Kahoot games just to help like enhance learning. We did a lot of using like filters and TikTok again, like to help keep them engaged. A lot of like PowerPoint presentations, kind of making it lively and fun. For my internship in the fall, it was a challenge because we were on like a specific kind of system, and so my internship hours were more or less like back to back. So I was having appointments from like 1 to 5 with no breaks in between because they are virtual. So it was kind of like this appointment, knock it out, that appointment, knock it out, versus like having that down office time in between if an appointment kind of wraps up early or things like that. I think that when you're in an advising setting, it's good to build rapport, but sometimes rapport is it's hard to develop a natural rapport when you're virtual and you're meeting someone for the first time, because body language counts, how you interact with them, your tone, things like that. And so you can provide that as much as possible virtually, but it's not always the same. So there was a little disconnect there at first for me, but again, like you kind of you gotta make the best of the situation. So yeah, that's how that shifted. What else? As far as school, it was just, Canvas and Blackboard. They just, try to keep constant communication. There was a lot of like connectivity issues.
Ooh.
Wi-Fi, that was a challenge, and we could go back to that. Like that definitely was a challenge. But I think that it allowed people to be a little bit more understanding and like flexible and like working autonomously, like in your own independence, and like in trusting that you can get something done without kind of like having to be physically present or connected in a virtual sense. So, but yeah, that's a challenge. Yes. Wi-Fi was a challenge.
Oh, I know, certainly. And how was the communication with your professors? Were they more lenient, being that you all were online and virtual? Was it hard to reach out and connect with them?
I would say the communication increased. I think because no one really knew what to expect, that they increased communication just to not only like make sure that we're still on track, but to provide a little bit of comfort. It wasn't hard to reach out to them. We always had like a very open form of communication, whether it's via email or like a Google number or something like that, where we can get in contact. But also communication between my peers kind of increased because we would do more group chats and it's like Zoom study sessions. Whereas like when we were in person before, it really was like you have your 2 or 3 people that you study with versus like 10 people are coming together on Zoom and like trying to figure out like what's going on and how we can make the best of it. So I think that increased.
I really utilize that.
Oh yeah, for sure. Like, in a master's program, you have to, because you don't know what's going on. You kind of got to know what's going on. So, communication was really effective, I think, personally.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing that. Let's see. How do you think this experience has shaped you as a person?
Like COVID overall? I think that it has allowed me to appreciate smaller things in life. Kind of what I was saying earlier about like, we don't realize the things that we do have until we don't have them. And it's just the simple thing is like the freedom to go outside when you want to and however you want to, or to just walk in the store and pick something up and it be there. Because there was a lot of things that like were not there when you needed it to be. And so just appreciating smaller things in life, appreciating family, like being friends, like being more connected, being more intentional about like maintaining relationships with people. And then I think overall just the idea of like we got through something that no one not even got through, because I think that people are still like on the latter side of kind of working through the impact of COVID. But just knowing that, this big situation happened and we were here to see it. And although there were a lot of negative things that came out of it, I think that there are some good things that came out of just having to kind of sit still a little bit. I was able to finish my master's program in a very like, not really traditional way, but I was able to live to say that I did it. What else? I mean, the world is virtual now, and so I kind of have a leg up on a little bit more like technology-wise. So I think that, has impacted who I am today. What else? And I think just like overall discipline, kind of how I was saying earlier, like knowing that, I can schedule or I can, make sure this is done or multitask in a different way. Like before I was not as like, I was organized, but I felt like the pandemic helped me really compartmentalize the things that I need to do and really like structure it, whether it's my day or assignments or work that I had to do. So I think I just enhanced that skill a little bit too.
Yes, I certainly agree with you on that. I can relate to that. And I always ask my participants to leave a piece of advice for someone that may be going through something as similar as the pandemic like this. What's some advice that you would leave for them?
Advice that I would leave is just to be resilient. try to find like the light out of a situation, even if it's a tough situation. Try to find something that like gives you joy, or do something that makes you feel good. Practice self-care and things like that, just because it may feel like it's gonna last forever, but it won't last forever. So definitely, just be resilient and kind of see what's on the other side. Like, look forward to the things that are on the other side of what you're going through versus like what you're going through. Yeah.
Okay. All right. And is there any additional stories that you would like to share?
And
thank you so much for that advice.
Yeah, no problem. I don't think so. I think that's mostly all I had. Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you so much. The Living Archive team appreciates you for taking the time out of your day to be interviewed. Thank you.
You're welcome.